A solitary coin toss on screen mirrored a life dramatically altered. In the year 1932, Scarface, portrayed by George Raft, embodied the mobster Guino Ronaldo with a single economical gesture. This subtle flip became his signature, a glimpse into Raft's own unconventional journey. A dancer who ascended to stardom, born from the gritty milieu of Hell's Kitchen's gangland. He courted Hollywood's most luminous actresses and formidable real-life gangsters with equal charm. Yet, this silver-tongued performer ultimately faded into obscurity, nearly destitute. You might believe you grasp his narrative, the roles he declined, the personas he cultivated for others, the clandestine negotiations struck at underworld gatherings where glances conveyed more than words. But you don't know the whole story. This is the complete saga of George Raft, Hollywood's authentic underworld figure. Welcome to Hollywood Mysteries. George Raft entered the world in either 1901 or possibly 1895, amidst the rough and tumble streets of Manhattan's Hell's Kitchen. In the golden age of Hollywood, birth dates were often fluid, and this elasticity predated filmmaking in the very neighborhood he hailed from. Raft himself clung to one date, while official records suggested another. What remained undisputed was the environment: fire escapes clinging to brick walls, the ceaseless rumble of the elevated train, and a rigorous education in survival learned on the streets. His parents, German immigrants, toiled to make ends meet in the transient world of carnivals and traveling shows. Young George was forged in a crucible that rendered him tougher than most boys his age. His mother, Ava, instilled dance steps in him before he could articulate full sentences. His father, Conrad, impressed upon him that New York offered no quarter to the weak, urging him to cultivate resilience on the unforgiving streets. He abandoned formal schooling at the age of 12 and left home by 13, navigating a series of arduous jobs simply to subsist. He dabbled as an electrician's assistant, briefly donned boxing gloves under the moniker Ducks Roofed, and even harbored aspirations of a minor league baseball career in Springfield. None of these endeavors proved lasting. His batting average was lackluster, the boxing ring proved a harsh mentor, and he perpetually found himself chasing his next paycheck. It was then he discovered a different application for his physicality, a return to the art his mother had taught him. "I observed men fighting, so I fought," Raft would later recount with a wry smile. "I saw men playing baseball, so I played baseball. Then I witnessed men dancing and earning a livelihood from it." His intuition proved sound. He began to leverage the dance techniques Ava had imparted. By his late teens, he was cleaning dance halls and amusement arcades, eventually dedicating himself to dancing full-time at Manhattan's amusement parks. His particular prowess in the tango garnered attention, and he began to captivate patrons in the clandestine speakeasies of New York's roaring 20s. He found employment as a taxi dancer, a paid escort for ballroom dancing, and ultimately secured a prominent position in the Review of Texas Ghanaian, a legendary figure of New York's nightclub scene. Ghanaian herself, a former dancer of considerable flair, incorporated Raft into her stage act, and the young man flourished. This work demanded charisma, rhythm, and the astute diplomacy of a seasoned bouncer. The atmosphere crackled with excitement and a palpable sense of recklessness. The blare of trumpets, the dazzling spectacle of fan dancers adorned with feathers, a hostess with a voice like a foghorn, and the commanding presence of a ringmaster. This was the milieu. Guinan reigned like a benevolent autocrat over her illicit domain. "Hello, suckers," she would bellow from her prominent table. The affluent and the daring flocked to be seen, while the city's vice squad made their presence felt. It was Guinan, according to numerous accounts, who facilitated Raft's entry into circles where careers were forged, and who championed him for a Charleston competition that captured the attention of talent scouts and journalists alike. Raft then capitalized on the opportunity. He moved with a seasoned assurance, his supple posture hinting at a man adept at maintaining equilibrium even in a crowded space. One could arrive with uncertainty, clouding their future, and depart with a concrete offer. This is precisely what transpired for George. Thus, the vibrant nightlife of New York propelled Raft toward the Great White Way. He debuted on Broadway, appearing in productions such as The City Chap and the musical revues Gay Paris and Padlocks of 1927. The remuneration surpassed that of the dance halls, and the company was more boisterous and impeccably attired. He soon found himself rotating through additional revues with titles that now evoke nostalgic postcards from a bygone era, including Mademoiselle and Palm Beach Nights. Critics lauded his footwork, hailing him as the fastest hoofer on the bill, and they also discerned the mischievous intensity that would later define his on-screen persona. The divide between a chorus boy and a bona fide star is narrow, often bridged by sheer nerve. Raft possessed this in abundance, which led him into the more clandestine corners of the theater and beyond, down into the dimly lit, whiskey-scented establishments of Manhattan's underground where the spotlight seldom penetrated. Speakeasies, in truth, were far from mere theatrical venues. They were complex ecosystems. The gentlemen indulging in champagne often had affiliations with businesses operating beneath the radar. Raft did not need to fabricate his underworld connections when he relocated westward. He had spent years dancing for, and occasionally alongside, individuals who financed the very establishments where he performed. His New York social circle included figures like Owney Madden and, somewhat later, Benjamin Bugsy Siegel. These associations were informal, forged through proximity, loyalty, and the practical reality of a driven young man seeking opportunities where the money flowed. When law enforcement shut down one establishment, the patrons would simply relocate a few blocks and rebrand. Raft understood the art of departure, a firm handshake, and the subtle advantage of arriving with a gratuity for the doorman. He was circumspect, affable with everyone, and beholden to no one. He entered into matrimony early in 1923 to Grace Malone, but the union proved short-lived. Nevertheless, deeply devout and resolutely Catholic, she denied him a divorce, even when it became apparent they were fundamentally incompatible. This impasse resulted in an arrangement that would profoundly complicate Raft's personal life for the subsequent 4 decades. He remained legally married to a woman with whom he no longer resided. He provided Grace with a stipend for years, speaking of her without animosity. While practically free to pursue romantic entanglements, he was forever barred from formalizing unions with the women he truly cared for. Before I delve into George's significant breakthrough, I wish to highlight the exquisite array of custom-designed shirts available at the Hollywood Mystery Store. Each piece is conceived and crafted in-house, offering exclusive designs found nowhere else. Wearing one signifies a touch of the unique and special. Our collection features numerous icons from the silent film era, including Louise Brooks, Gloria Swanson, Rudolph Valentino, and Pola Negri. You'll find a link to the store in the description below, and it's also displayed on your screen. Every purchase provides substantial support to the channel, and we cherish the messages accompanying your orders on our site. My sincere gratitude extends to all those who have already acquired a shirt. Please feel free to browse and secure some distinctive Hollywood merchandise. By the late 1920s, he had established a respectable career as a stage dancer, but the allure of cinema began to call. When Hollywood extended its invitation, Raft responded, ironically, not as a dancer, but in the 1931 film Quick Millions, cast as a menacing figure assisting Spencer Tracy. Raft maximized his limited screen time with a practiced efficiency. A mere glance, a tightening of the jaw, conveyed his immediate consideration of his positioning for the impending confrontation. His dancer's poise provided an advantage that most actors struggled to emulate. He possessed an innate understanding of how to project an air of world weariness and how to move with the confidence of someone owning the immediate future. This marked his inaugural portrayal of a gangster, and the formula proved instantly successful. Once established in Tinseltown, Raft's career experienced an explosive trajectory, charting a course that he might once have eschewed directly into the cinematic depiction of the criminal underworld. His next appearance was in Taxi, another pre-code film released in 1932. Today, it is most recognized for holding the distinction of being the second most misquoted film in cinematic history, trailing only Casablanca. For the record, James Cagney's line was originally far less concise. "Come out and take it, you dirty yellow-bellied rat, or I'll give it to you through the door." However, in the popular consciousness, the phrase evolved into the simpler, "You dirty rat, you killed my brother." Meanwhile, a seemingly inconsequential sequence offers significant insight into George Raft's capabilities. It depicts a dance competition where Raft's character triumphs over Cagney's, only to be physically assaulted as a consequence. What resonates is the swiftness with which he telegraphs arrogance and the understated resilience with which he absorbs the inevitable humiliation inflicted by the commanding presence of Cagney. It was a masterclass in leaving an indelible mark within a mere 2 minutes, a singular concept yielding a lasting impression. Then came Scarface. Here's how the pivotal moment unfolded. On a monochromatic day in September 1931, within a studio soundstage designed to resemble a Chicago nightclub, director Howard Hawks was blocking a scene he deemed too subdued. Paul Mooney occupied the central frame as Tony Camonte, a figure of insatiable appetite and brutal violence. However, the lieutenant flanking him, a character named Guino Rinaldi, felt underdeveloped to Hawks. The actor portraying him had spoken sparingly, and when he did, his delivery sounded like a street urchin struggling with his vowels. Consequently, Hawks instructed George Raft to do something with his hands. Raft, who had honed the ability to convey more with a gesture than with dialogue, produced a coin and began to idly flip it between his knuckles. The entire set seemed to hold its breath. The shot transformed into a kind of visual symphony. A hardened individual now appeared to be toying with time itself. The coin elevated a minor henchman into a character possessing a private ritual, someone who gauged risk by tactile sensation. Later, when Raft humorously referenced this moment in Some Like It Hot, he was fully cognizant of the joke. In 1931, however, it was pure, unadulterated invention. This seemingly simple manipulation of fingers would become deeply ingrained in the cultural fabric. It was replicated in animated cartoons, repurposed by Pulp Fiction villains, and served as a signal that a former dancer had mastered the art of making silence speak, a potent recipe for stardom. Scarface arrived in 1932 with a resounding impact. It stood as the most audacious of the early gangster films, the one that clanged shut its metallic gate, allowing the audience a tantalizing glimpse inside. And Raft emerged from it with a distinct persona. He didn't need to overact. His presence was his performance. Raft offered a study in understated composure. The film dramatically altered his market value and his professional opportunities. Paramount signed him and began orchestrating projects tailored to his distinctive screen presence. Publicists of the era propagated fabricated tales of discovering him in a humble malt shop, asserting that he carried an air of nocturnal mystery. For once, their embellishments fell short of the actor's actual mystique. Raft quickly understood his place. He recognized he could not outshine Cagney. However, he didn't need to. The mere presence of George Raft lurking in a doorway could command a scene. He simply embodied the archetype more convincingly than anyone else. He perfectly amplified the image of a 1930s gangster. Young men emulated his style, the crisp white shirt paired with a dark tie and the low-brimmed hat. Raft's career momentum propelled him next into Mae West's debut Hollywood vehicle, Night After Night. West cast him as the suave gangster boyfriend of her character, inspired by Texas Guinean's nightclub persona, marking his first leading man role. Suddenly, Raft was cast opposite the era's reigning bombshell, exuding a self-assured coolness that captivated audiences. West's desire to cast him soon revealed a romantic undertone, and the two embarked on what was, technically, an affair. Although he had been separated from Grace for years by this point, the studios remained apprehensive. Once this romantic entanglement concluded, with Raft and West maintaining a lifelong friendship, he began to intertwine his professional and personal life in a manner that proved increasingly consequential. He engaged in several notable affairs during the 1930s, most prominently with Tallulah Bankhead, a woman famously known for her voracious appetite and sharp intellect. However, this liaison was destined for failure, as Raft, according to Bankhead's later autobiographical account, subjected her to a distressing experience. He had also commenced an affair with Lola Ferguson, a captivatingly dangerous and ultimately tragic showgirl who perished in 1933 following their separation. An episode dedicated to her will be featured on our new channel, Society Mysteries. Be sure to subscribe if this piques your interest. Within a few years, he cemented his reputation as one of Paramount's preferred tough guys. In 1933, he starred in Midnight Club and subsequently joined forces with Wallace Beery in The Bowery, portraying the real-life hero, Steve Brody. He even continued to showcase his dancing skills in certain films. In the 1934 production of Bolero, he played a Latin dance instructor partnered with Carole Lombard. Their on-screen tango was so intensely sensuous that cinema patrons reportedly departed the theater speaking Spanish to their romantic partners. However, not all of this was solely the result of acting talent. Off-screen, they shared a passionate romance that garnered considerable attention in the gossip columns. Lombard, who possessed a vocabulary as colorful as a prizefighter's, later declared George to be the greatest lover she ever had, and she would not be the last to make such a declaration. By the mid-1930s, Raft's celebrity status was truly on the ascent. His characteristically understated demeanor distinguished him from his more frenetic colleagues. Co-star Spencer Tracy once remarked that he had never encountered a tougher man off-screen. As Edward G. Robinson observed, Raft's countenance presented a fantastic, arresting mask. He became such an ingrained presence in gangster films that his peers fostered a legend around his capabilities. Columnist Hedda Hopper noted in 1937 that Raft had made millions but hasn't got them due to a penchant for gambling and a persistent loyalty to his friends. The term old friends served as a subtle euphemism for the mob enforcers who ensured his continued prominence. Indeed, he generously shared his winnings with associates like Bugsy Siegel and witnessed considerable sums vanish at the dice tables. He and Bugsy had been acquainted since childhood. While the true extent of Raft's entanglement with organized crime will likely remain a mystery, it is known that at one point he served at the very least as a getaway driver for Siegel. In 1938, he was questioned by the FBI, not regarding his connection to Siegel, but concerning two other Jewish mobsters, Louis Buchalter and Jacob Shapiro, prominent figures within Murder, Inc. This led to speculation that the Jewish mob was responsible for fostering Raft's career. In reality, it was Owney Madden who had discreetly provided financial backing for Raft's early Hollywood endeavors, believing it would be advantageous to have one of their own featured on the silver screen. Madden, an Irish-American gangster known as the Killer, was a significant player during the Prohibition era's bootlegging operations. He also managed the highly controversial Cotton Club, an illicit establishment where a constellation of legendary black performers entertained an exclusively white clientele during the 1920s and the era of Jim Crow segregation. Consequently, Raft entered the film industry with genuine street credibility, and Hollywood capitalized on this perception. Raft himself would later jest privately that while Cagney merely portrayed toughness, he genuinely embodied it. Away from the cameras, Raft's personal life continued to generate headlines with the same intensity as any tabloid fodder. His subsequent affair proved to be one of the most surprising of his life. He fell deeply in love with the reigning queen of cinema, Norma Shearer. Norma and George first met at a gathering hosted by Charles and Norma Shearer. The attraction between them was immediate. To most observers, their pairing seemed improbable. Norma was at the zenith of her career, celebrated for her roles in films like The Women and embodying the epitome of MGM's refined elegance. Raft, conversely, was Hollywood's resident figure of the underworld. Yet, the chemistry between them was undeniably real. They became a visible couple, appearing together at social events across the nation and internationally. They discovered they had more in common than was apparent to the public. The formidable actress who defied the powerful executives at MGM after Thalberg's passing could perhaps understand the perspective of a tough character like Raft, even if their worlds were vastly different. Their relationship endured through much of 1939 and 1940, during which they saw each other almost daily. However, Raft remained legally bound to his wife, Grace, and was still unable to secure a divorce, even after she initiated legal proceedings seeking a settlement of $500,000. Recognizing the untenable nature of the situation and concerned for her children's well-being, Norma ultimately terminated the affair, describing the decision as sad but necessary. Despite the separation, both individuals continued to speak favorably of each other in subsequent years. Norma echoed Carol Lombard's sentiments regarding George's exceptional prowess in the bedroom. Following this, he engaged in a highly publicized affair with Betty Grable. However, it appears that any prior chivalry had waned by this point, as he exhibited abusive behavior towards Betty, a subject I delve into more extensively in my episode on her, which you can access after this one. A link will be provided in the description. Nevertheless, Betty seemed equally enthralled by him. Their age difference of nearly 2 decades notwithstanding, she remarked, "I would have married George Raft a week after I met him. I was so desperately, so deeply in love with him." But when he failed to commit for 2.5 years, she perceived no future in a romance with a married man. This narrative, by now a familiar refrain, suggested Raft was destined to remain legally tied to a woman he hadn't seen in almost 20 years, apart from their ongoing legal disputes. By this juncture, Raft had reached the pinnacle of his film career. Now under contract with Paramount Pictures, he commanded an astonishing $200,000 annually, making him the 3rd highest paid actor in America, trailing only Warner Baxter and Gary Cooper. Paramount developed films specifically to showcase his on-screen presence. He headlined the drama Souls at Sea alongside Cooper and Sylvia Sidney. And in 1939, he co-starred with burgeoning talents William Holden and a then relatively unknown Humphrey Bogart in Invisible Stripes, a crime drama set within a prison. In the same year, he shared the screen with James Cagney in Each Dawn I Die, and he reunited with Bogart in the 1940 production They Drive by Night, a suspenseful tale of truck drivers navigating perilous circumstances, a film also notable for Ida Lupino's intense courtroom performance. However, on set, Raft frequently clashed with his co-stars, and no film better exemplified the volatile dynamic of George Raft than the 1941 production of Manpower. The film was notorious for its tempestuous atmosphere, with the primary antagonism arising between Raft and Edward G. Robinson. Filmed in April 1941, discord erupted when Raft began verbally berating Robinson over a line of dialogue that Raft objected to, while Robinson deemed essential. This provoked a barrage of insults from George. A week later, tensions between the pair reignited, this time captured by a Life magazine staff photographer who documented an image that stunned film enthusiasts upon its publication. The photograph, as you can observe, depicts the moment Raft and Robinson engaged in a physical altercation, with cast and crew observing the scene. Director Raoul Walsh had limited success in quelling the simmering feud between the stars. Raft, it appeared, was the instigator. He harbored jealousy regarding Robinson's prominent billing. Given Raft's considerably larger screen time, he believed he should have received top billing. Instead, he was listed third, behind Robinson and Marlene Dietrich. Dietrich also proved to be a source of frustration for Raft, with whom he had become infatuated, and he suspected she was involved with Robinson. Dietrich, who, like George, understood the allure of impeccable tailoring and the captivating power of a reserved smile, had Raft completely under her influence. He even refused to slap Dietrich in one scene, stating, "I respect women," until both Walsh and Dietrich convinced him it was imperative. The irony lies in the fact that Robinson was only cast after Raft declined to work with the other actor being considered for the role, Humphrey Bogart, whom he openly disliked due to Bogart's political leanings. Robinson would later describe Raft as touchy, difficult, and thoroughly impossible to work with. Although they would eventually reconcile in later years and star together in films as older men, others held him in high regard. Gangster Mickey Cohen once stated he would want Raft to portray him in a film, remarking, "Because others would depict me as a vicious gangster, but George would not." Throughout his career, Raft consistently demonstrated an ability to call in favors and issue warnings, sometimes of a grave nature. When James Cagney assumed the presidency of the Screen Actors Guild and actively opposed the Mafia's influence in Hollywood during the war years, Cagney later insisted that he owed his life to Raft. Whispers circulated that a syndicate assassin was slated to dispatch Cagney via a plummeting light fixture, and Raft, through some maneuver, managed to have the assassination attempt discreetly scrubbed. As a celebrated icon of the criminal underworld, Raft exuded a refined menace. The studio's photographers frequently snapped him, either lounging with a cigarette over a bar or striking a pose in the quintessential gangster's gleaming white silk cravat. Because he never approached his film acting with undue seriousness, he often disregarded script passages, claiming he only committed enough to navigate each scene. Raft favored a remarkably minimalist acting approach. He'd jest that he never bothered watching his own cinematic endeavors. "I consistently portrayed the chap with the firearm," he'd remark. "I appeared in 105 films and met my end 85 times. How much misfortune can one experience?" he'd quip, chuckling that while every significant on-screen accolade invariably went to his co-stars, he was invariably the one to meet his demise. Away from the glare of the cameras, Raft actively contributed to the war effort. He made appearances on military camp stages and participated in fundraising drives, all tied to the Hollywood Victory Committee's Caravan Initiative. This flurry of public appearances was later immortalized in the 1944 documentary film Follow the Boys, where his on-screen persona aids in coordinating performers for the troops. In late 1942, he even bought out his contract with Warner Brothers to pursue a planned theatrical production centered on his formative years in Hell's Kitchen. However, this project faltered, coinciding with New York authorities launching a tax investigation and separately summoning him before a grand jury to address inquiries regarding underworld finances. He later provided testimony in a 1944 bookmaking trial linked to Bugsy Siegel, and by 1946 found himself embroiled in an Australian civil lawsuit concerning an alleged physical altercation. Following Siegel's 1947 assassination, Raft's name resurfaced in the press once more, with gossip columns noting that the vast sums he had accumulated had vanished with a certain mystery, and not entirely at the craps tables, as a considerable portion seemingly found its way to Bugsy and his associates as a gesture of appreciation. In 1941, Raft's cinematic trajectory took a famously self-sabotaging turn. The Jack Warner studio had secured the rights to High Sierra, a gritty novel depicting a desperate fugitive gangster. The nascent screenwriter was John Huston, and he envisioned Raft in the role of Roy Earl, a mobster. Director Raoul Walsh deemed Raft an ideal fit for the part, but Raft did the unthinkable. He defiantly declared he would not portray a criminal who faces execution. As Walsh elucidated that the character had to perish in the narrative, Raft purportedly retorted, "I am not going to die." He even delivered a final, defiant message to studio head Jack Warner. Tell Jack Warner to shove it. In a single decisive action, he relinquished the leading role in what would become a Warner Brothers classic. When all others declined the part, Edward G. Robinson, James Cagney, and even Paul Mooney bowed out. His long-standing rival Bogart accepted the offer. High Sierra became Bogart's breakout performance, transforming him from a supporting player into a major star. Scarcely had this decision been finalized when the studio lined up Raft for another high-stakes career gamble, the Maltese Falcon. John Huston was slated to direct, and Raft's contract stipulated his casting as Sam Spade, the protagonist. But once again, George squandered a golden opportunity. Raft was simply handed the role on paper without even a formal meeting, and Huston began planning the production. George harbored his displeasure, but exercised restraint for the moment. It wasn't until 4 days prior to the commencement of filming that Raft finally penned an explosive letter to Jack Warner. He insisted that The Maltese Falcon was not a significant film and claimed he had no obligation to make any picture that wasn't important. It proved to be a fateful decision. Warner shrugged and yet again replaced Raft with Bogart for The Falcon. That film went on to become another resounding success. Huston kept Spade's scenes taut and brilliantly captured the dark wit of Dashiell Hammett's novel. Bogart's portrayal served as another significant boost to his rapidly ascending career. Raft never even appeared for costume fittings. His silent professional absence resonated throughout the sound stages. Between these two critical decisions, discarding High Sierra and vehemently protesting The Maltese Falcon, Raft effectively jeopardized his standing at Warner Brothers and, ironically, cleared a path to stardom for a man he resented. A resentful Raft never truly overcame living in Bogart's shadow for the remainder of his career, especially given that everything Bogart achieved could have been his with a more judicious attitude and a few more acceptances rather than rejections. Despite these setbacks, Raft continued to work with regularity throughout the 1940s. He maintained a presence in gangster roles while also dabbling in lighter fare. In 1942, he finally found a way to bring his Broadway narrative to fruition. He convinced Warner Brothers to permit him to star in Universal's Broadway, a film largely inspired by his own early experiences as a dancer. The studio, however, was so exasperated by Raft's obstinacy that they suspended him for 8 months before approving the loan out. Furthermore, Raft had to personally pay Warner $27,500 so that Warner Brothers could borrow Robert Cummings from Universal in exchange. Upon its release, he portrayed a character based on himself, a fictionalized rendition of a hoofer in 1920s New York. It was a self-referential dip into nostalgia and a departure from the typical tough guy persona for which he was known. However, it did not achieve significant success. Remarkably, Warner Brothers initiated another major project for Raft in 1942, and once again, he declined, leaving Bogart to once more assume not only the lead, but also all the crucial plot lines for the wartime spy comedy All Through the Night. By this juncture, Raft's most significant career opportunities were receding. He took on a supporting role in Background to Danger, essentially a war thriller featuring Nazi plots in Turkey. It was another tense production, and Raft insisted on substantial alterations to his character, though he was ultimately vindicated when the film proved to be a hit. Nevertheless, shortly after filming concluded, Raft bought out the remainder of his contract with Warner Brothers and departed the studio. In fact, Hollywood gossip suggested he could have portrayed Rick Blaine in Casablanca. However, in reality, Jack Warner and Hal Wallace had already decided upon Bogart for that role. Another Hollywood myth asserted that Raft turned it down, but the studio by that point had concluded that Raft had become more of a liability than an asset. In truth, he might well have been offered the part had his history with the studio been less turbulent. Concurrently, he once again found himself under scrutiny by the authorities, this time facing an investigation for tax evasion after being found to be in arrears by several $100,000. Shortly thereafter, Raft was offered the lead in Billy Wilder's Double Indemnity, only to awkwardly pass once more. He apparently informed Wilder that if the film were reimagined as a comedy, he would reconsider, a proposition Wilder flatly rejected. Fred MacMurray assumed the role of Walter Neff and delivered one of cinema's most iconic noir performances. Instead, he managed a couple of unexpected successes, including 1945's Johnny Angel, and alongside a young Ava Gardner, Whistle Stop. Meanwhile, his associations with the mob brought him considerable difficulties, not least of which was being subjected to a barrage of negative publicity when his childhood friend and benefactor was murdered in what was most likely a mob execution in June 1947. Raft had taken the stand to defend Siegel's reputation in a trial just a couple of years prior, thus only intensifying the murkiness surrounding his ties to the underworld. The 1950s saw Raft drifting through the film industry, relying on his established star power. he settled into gangster and tough guy roles in B-movies and secondary parts. On screen, he still retained his characteristic impassive gaze, but the productions were smaller in scale. In the interim, he engaged in various undertakings connected to his old network. He was offered a share in Siegel's Flamingo Hotel following the mob boss's demise, with the plan for Raft to assume the role of entertainment director for the infamous Las Vegas gambling establishment. However, he was denied a gaming license due to his connections to organized crime. Though 3 years later, he did manage to secure one on appeal. Concurrently, he entered into a business venture in Havana with mob boss Santo Traficante Jr., where they established the Capri Casino. Raft could be found overseeing craps tables at the Capri for the remainder of the decade, at least almost the entirety of it. In January 1959, Fidel Castro's forces arrived in Havana following a 3-year guerrilla campaign against the Cuban government, and Raft was present at the Capri the night the revolutionaries took control. Castro immediately ordered the closure of all Cuban casinos, and Raft fled back to the United States by boat. Amidst the ensuing upheaval, he took on a couple of noteworthy supporting roles during this period, most notably opposite Robert Taylor in Rogue Cop. He also starred alongside Ginger Rogers in the classic noir film Black Widow in 1954. In 1959, Raft made one of his most visible appearances in his later career in Billy Wilder's comedy, Some Like It Hot, portraying Chicago mob boss Spats Colombo opposite Marilyn Monroe, Jack Lemmon, and Tony Curtis. In one scene, he glares at a thug flipping a coin and menacingly asks, "Where did you pick up that cheap trick?" This was a knowing nod to the trademark gesture that had cemented his fame in Scarface, a good-humored parody of his own legend and one of his final significant appearances in a Hollywood classic. It could have been a comeback, but aside from an appearance in Ocean's 11 in 1960, it marked more or less the conclusion of George Raft's Hollywood career. However, his legal troubles were beginning to close in on Raft. In 1965, he was finally convicted on tax evasion charges, though he was only fined $2,500. The following year, he was compelled to appear before a New York grand jury to give testimony regarding his associations with organized crime. The pressure was mounting, and Raft's influential friends were largely deceased, either through foul play or other means. It was time to depart before matters escalated significantly. Thus, the final act was set to unfold in London, and during the vibrant mid-60s, Raft became the public face of mobsters Angelo Bruno and Meyer Lansky's latest enterprise, the Colony Sports Club. This was an upscale gambling establishment on Piccadilly that the Cosa Nostra hoped would evolve into a mob stronghold in London. Raft would once again serve as the frontman. He reverted to the persona of a true casino boss, impeccably dressed and hosting high society, even as British tabloids sniffed out scandal. However, the mob had long encountered difficulties in establishing genuine influence in London, and the British government maintained a very low tolerance for American organized crime operations. Consequently, after returning to the United States for a holiday in 1967, Raft was definitively denied re-entry to Britain, officially barred as an undesirable mob figurehead. The news caused embarrassment for both the Colony Club and Raft, but the British authorities were unyielding. Raft was excluded, and that was the definitive end of the matter. George Raft spent his concluding years quietly back in Los Angeles, a diminished version of the figure who once commanded studio lots and speakeasy establishments. He accepted television roles, appeared in B-movies, and even briefly became the spokesperson for Alka-Seltzer. Work was scarce, barely trickling in. His mob connections had long since dissolved, and his funds dwindled. By the close of the 1970s, he was penniless, subsisting on $800 a month from his Social Security benefits and a pension. His health was also deteriorating, and he battled emphysema. In November 1980, at the age of 79, he passed away alone, with little money and even less public recognition. An almost forgotten figure, he left behind a minuscule estate. Reports indicate his residence contained a $10,000 life insurance policy and a worn collection of finely tailored yet antique gangster suits, which a dealer later sold for a few $100s, as Raft had left no will. There was no grand funeral or celebrated biography awaiting him, only the unceremonious conclusion of a tumultuous life. His narrative serves as a cautionary tale, tragic in its missed opportunities, thrilling in its almost unbelievable peaks, and shadowed by the unseen criminal forces that manipulated his destiny. For those who recall him, George Raft remains one of Hollywood's original tough guys, complex, charismatic, and utterly unforgettable in the enigma of his life and films. Well, that concludes this episode. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share the video with a friend if you enjoyed it. Feel free to leave me a comment to tell me which of George's performances you remember most fondly. I've been Ava. This has been Hollywood Mysteries. And until next time, sweet dreams.